Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military Summary channel and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 3rd of December of 2025. Today we have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. So, the negotiations of the century ended yesterday on the territory of Moscow between the United States of America and the Russian Federation. And according to information we have, as we can see right now, they ended without any results for Ukraine and for the European Union. And you know that today I came to a very interesting conclusion that both the Russians and the Americans have the same purposes on Ukraine. And the purpose, the global purpose of the United States of America and the Russian Federation is not to allow the European Union and NATO to become stronger. So probably this is a focal point of both the Russians and the Americans. So we can see that they have something common. They don't want the NATO, the European Union, to become stronger, let's say using Ukraine in their purposes. So now both the Russians and the Americans are doing everything they can so this will never happen. So we understand the position of the Russian Federation, we understand the position of the United States of America. They're not the same. We need to understand that the Russians don't want the European Union and NATO to become stronger using Ukraine, but the United States of America wants to save the balance. They want to save the balance between Europe and the Russian Federation. They want the Europe and the Russian Federation to become equal in the strength. They don't want, let's say, Europe to become stronger than Russian, and they don't want the Russian Federation to become stronger than the European Union. They want to see a balance in this area. So this is the task of let's say the United States of America. As for Russia, of course, they want to become stronger and they want to see European Union much weaker. But what is the position of the European Union? And the position is very simple. The European Union understands that these allies needs to become stronger. These allies needs to have its own army. These allies need to have Ukraine inside of this union. So that is why the European Union is going to act, and probably they're going to act very aggressively. And for example, today we got lots of reports from the Ursula von der Leyen that the European Commission approved a potential reparations loans for Ukraine, which implies the expropriation of Russian sovereign assets. Ursula von der Leyen stated, key points: Ukraine needs 135 billion by the end of 2027 to continue military operations against Russia and maintain the functioning of the state. So they need, Ukraine needs 135 billion for the next 2 years, 2026 and 2027. And telling the truth, I believe that the European Union will find this money. And it seems that something bad is going to happen with the Russian assets. It's clear to me. The European Commission proposed an alternative to the expropriation of Russian assets in the form of a 90 billion euro loan, which could cover 2/3 of Kiev's needs. The expropriation of Russian assets in the European Union does not require compromise, but will be approved by a qualified majority. The European Commission intends to prohibit the enforcement of foreign court decisions within the European Union as a part of Russia's retaliatory measures against the assets expropriation. So the European Union and the European Commission is ready to take the sovereign Russian assets and to use them for military purposes and to use them to prolong the special military operation and the war between Russia and Ukraine. And obviously this money will make Europe stronger, because obviously most of this money, most of these assets would be used by the European Union to improve their own military facilities and production of arms on the territory of the European Union. But currently, the main problem between the European Commission and these assets, the main problem is the state of Belgium, because they are not going to use these assets, they're not going to use this money for these purposes, because obviously they understand that they are at a very risk. Belgium rejected a plan to steal Russian assets even before it was made publicly, according to Bloomberg. The text that the Commission will present today, with the text that we have already discussed a minute ago, does not address our concerns satisfactorily. It is unacceptable to waste money and leave us alone at risk. Our doors have always been and remain open, but we are troubled by the feeling that we have not been heard. Our concerns are being ignored, said Foreign Minister. Instead, the Foreign Minister of Belgium called on the European Union to borrow money to secure a loan to Ukraine. It now seems doubtful that the the allocation of funds will be agreed upon by December 18 as was planned. So we have a conflict between Belgium and the European Union, and we see that Belgium attacks the authorities of the European Union. Today we got lots of reports and lots of updates, not just today but this day, about corruption in the top-ranked authorities of the European Union. The European Union's largest corruption scandal is being used to pressure Ursula von der Leyen, according to Politico. The corruption scandal in Brussels could become the European Union's largest in the 21st century. The scale of the case against former European Union Foreign Service Chief Mogherini and Secretary General Sannino is comparable to the mass resignation of the European Commission under Jacques Santer in 1999. Ursula von der Leyen's critics in the European Union are raising the possibility of a new vote for no confidence. So the state of Belgium is trying to force Ursula von der Leyen to stop talking about Russian sovereign assets and not to do anything in this direction. But it seems that the president of the European Commission knows what is she doing, and most likely she will do everything she can with the purpose to get this money and to use them for the military purposes. But at the same time, and despite all these problems with these sovereign assets, we see that the European countries, despite corruption scandals in Ukraine, continue giving money to Ukraine. For example, today we got report that Norway will allocate an additional 500 million to Ukraine for American weapons, according to its foreign minister. Furthermore, today we got that Germany will also allocate an additional 200 million for weapons for Ukraine under the Pearl Initiative, said Foreign Minister Weidefull. So we see that the European Union is not going to stop supporting Ukraine. They will continue fighting with the Russian Federation. And now it's very important, the position of the United States of America. As of the end of the 3rd of December of 2025, the United States of America says that they will not be able to support Ukraine forever. Rubio explained why he did not conduct negotiations with the colors. We have some irrational people involved in this issue, people who believe that we should only talk to the Ukrainian side and not talk to the Russian at all. You can't end the war between Russia and Ukraine without talking to Russia. Well, yes, but let's be honest, it's not something between Russia and Ukraine. It's mostly about Russia and the West that happens on the territory of Ukraine. I completely agree with these words. The US at least are able to pretend that they want to negotiate. The European Union and Britain cannot even think rationally or pretend they can be this way. Echo chamber in its full. But the question is, who trained you elites to be this way? So the United States of America are trying to be out of the conflict, and they want to save the balance between the European Union and the Russian Federation, because the balance in Europe plays in the US favor, because they will see that nobody is strong but only the United States of America is strong. So, and probably this is something common with the Russian Federation, because Russia also wants the European Union not to become stronger than it is right now. But while this conflict between these three, let's say, states, organizations, Ukraine continues suffering huge problems, and Ukraine has huge problems, of course, and first of all with the budget. According to information we have, Ukraine has significant budget problems. They don't have money, and they don't have 45 billion for 2026. Ukrainians hope that most likely they're gonna get frozen assets, but as of now, this process is not, let's say, developing in the way that Ukraine needs. Anyway, let's wait, continue what is going to be next, but once again, something tells me that the European Commission will find a way how to take the Russian assets and how to provide them to Ukraine for the military purposes. Now let's discuss the situation on the ground, and first let's talk about the Zaporizhzhia direction, where the Russians continue their offensive operation. The Russians are intensifying their, let's say, offensive along the entire line of combat contact, starting from the settlement of Stepnogorsk and ending with the settlement of Gulay Polye. As for the settlement of Stepnogorsk, we believe that in coming days or maybe even in coming hours, the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation will confirm complete control over this territory. The Russians are about to capture the settlement. The Russians encircled the village from many directions according to different neutral and pro-Russian sources, and we see that Ukrainians currently have no chances to save control over this territory and they will fall back. But at the same time, and according to different mappers, mainly according to pro-Russian sources, now we can see two main vectors of Russian offensive. According to different mappers, the Russians are trying to develop their offensive operation in the northern direction, trying to get as close as possible to the settlement of Veselyanka, which is something like already a part of the Zaporizhzhia agglomeration, and at the same time, and from the other side, the Russians are trying to advance in the eastern direction, and during the previous 12 hours, according to different pro-Russian sources, the Russians managed to improve their positions and to shorten the distance significantly to the settlement of Lukyanovsk, which means that the battle for this dense network of the fortifications, for this stronghold, for this huge stronghold, is going to start in coming days or maybe even hours, maybe this upcoming night. This is a very important position of the armored forces of Ukraine, and if Russians are able to capture the settlement of Lukyanovsk and the strongholds around the settlement, the Russians will be able to continue offensive operation further in the eastern direction to attack the city of Orekhov from behind. So obviously the Zaporizhzhia direction and its western direction is going to be very hot in coming days. Furthermore, the sources reported that the Russians continue offensive operation in the territory of the settlement of Novodanilovka. During the previous weeks, the Russians made lots of attempts to answer the village itself, and today, according to different mappers, the Russians managed to answer the village and to dig in deeper. Now the Russians are clearing the settlement and trying to force the Ukrainians to fall back, and this is a very dangerous situation for the armored forces of Ukraine because the Russians are getting closer and closer to the city of Orekhov. As for this direction itself, the main purpose of Russians is just to distract attention of the armored forces of Ukraine and not to allow them to redeploy troops from the city of Orekhov in the eastern direction towards the city of Gulay-Polye, where the Russians, it seems, are going to capture the city of Gulay-Polye also in coming days and obviously in 2025. Now let's talk about the city of Gulay-Polye. As you can see, during the previous 12 hours, we received lots of changes on the ground. Before we start, let's compare the map between the dates. So this is the situation on the 29th of November of 2025, and it seems that this is the moment when the Russians launched their major offensive operation with the purpose to break through Ukrainian defense completely and to capture all this territory. So this is how the map has been adjusted since the 29th of November of 2025 till the 3rd of December of 2025. Lots of changes, as you can see, and the Russians, the most important change is coming from the settlement of Chervona. Today, pro-Russian sources, first of all, the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation confirmed that the units of the Group of Forces East managed to capture the village. Later, we got this video where we can see how exactly the clashes for the settlement were taking place. The Russians were bombing the village with TOS flamethrower systems. Furthermore, the Russians bombed the settlement with aviation. So Ukrainians suffered huge losses and Russians basically secured the village without probably facing any resistance from the Ukrainian side. And as usually in these videos, in the final part, we can see lots of soldiers with Russian flags through the settlement. Based on this video, based on the report of the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation, we adjusted the map in this area. Furthermore, the Russians improved their positions to the north of the city of Gulay-Polye. This video was also published by pro-Ukrainian sources, and here we can see how units of the 142nd Infantry Brigade of the Armored Forces of Ukraine were attacking Russians through this area. So based on this video, we came to the conclusion that most likely fields between this area of attack, these points of attack, and the settlement of Yablokovo was already captured by the Armored Forces of the Russian Federation. So these are the changes on the ground between the dates. And of course, the most important area is the settlement of Varvarovka. Today, several pro-Russian sources and several neutral mappers confirmed that the Russians managed to shorten the distance to the village of Varvarovka from the north and from the east. Furthermore, when talking about pro-Russian sources, today they stated that the battle for the settlement of Varvarovka has already begun. So you know that this is a very important update. Of course, the situation is very difficult for the armored forces of Ukraine on the territory of Gulay-Polye. The Russians are bombing and attacking the settlement, trying to reduce the city till ruins and so force Ukrainians to fall back. And we truly believe that Ukrainians would be forced to fall back from the area of Guliapole very soon, and Russians will be able to capture the city very fast. But this is not the most important point. The main point is the next defense layer. We've been talking about this for a very long period of time, that the city of Guliapole is a very important city, but the next defense layer, the defense of the city, the wall, the Zaporizhzhia wall, is probably even more important than the city, because everything depends exactly on this wall. If Russians are able to break through this wall and to capture this, let's say, dense network of the fortifications and to answer the Zaporizhzhia operational space, then this is going to be the end for the entire Zaporizhzhia direction and for the city of Zaporizhzhia itself. So it will take probably from 5 till 7 months, and the Ukrainians would be forced to fall back from the city, and Russians will be able to capture this territory. And you know that yesterday pro-Russian sources published a very interesting video, this one. So this is the video about the battle for the city of Dobropolye that took place yesterday, but there are a lots of interesting episodes. So as you can see, the video of this site published by the Group of Forces East usually starts with, let's say, aviation strikes or with attacks using two flamethrower systems, but this video is an exception. In this video we can see during the first seconds the trenches, fortifications, barbed wire, dragon teeth. We can see different engineering equipment and so on. And the pro-Russian sources published these episodes with a reason, with a certain purpose. The pro-Russian sources with this video are trying to show us this Zaporizhzhia defense layer. So lots of different engineering structures and constructions, and the source is saying that this video was made somewhere along the line of defense of Zaporizhzhia, somewhere from this territory. So, and the author and the Group of Forces East is trying to show us what kind of barrier the Russians will face within days, within 2 or 3 weeks, when they will begin offensive operation in the western direction. They're just trying to show us how difficult this battle is going to be, but this is going to be a major battle, and probably the last decisive battle for Ukraine. If Ukraine is not able to hold this Zaporizhzhia wall, then most likely Ukraine will be forced to pull its units from the entire Zaporizhzhia region, and probably from some part of the Dnipro region as well. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the city of Pokrovsk. During the previous 12 hours, we got additional updates. The Russians, first of all, managed to improve their positions on the territory of the city of Grishina. The Russians improved their positions mainly in the southeastern part, according to different neutral mappers. Furthermore, the Russians continued tightening the news around positions of the armed forces of Ukraine on the territory of the city of Mirnograd. And this is a very important situation. And today we got a very interesting article published by the Western media regarding the situation in this area. So this is the article that was published by Bild. 1,000 Ukrainian troops are surrounded in Mirnograd and are asking for help, Bild reports, citing one of the soldiers. We must either withdraw our contingent from Mirnograd or ensure stable logistics, get us out of here or supply us. Otherwise, the city's defenders will remain there forever. The situation is critical. Logistics are carried out exclusively by drones and ground-based robotic systems. Even delivering food is already a problem. So we believe and we think that in 2 weeks the city of Mirnograd would be captured by the armed forces of the Russian Federation completely, without any chances for Ukrainians to restore control and restore logistics to this area. Now let's move further and let's talk about the Sivers direction. During the previous 24 hours, as you can see, we received dozens of videos exactly from the area to the west of the city. Of course, the most important video is coming from the settlement of Svято-Pokrovskaya, and here we can see a Russian soldier that was either clearing a basement or was talking with Ukrainians inside the basement, suggesting them to surrender. Very difficult to understand, but during this video we can see how Ukrainians surrendered. This is the Ukrainian soldiers that surrendered, so which means that the Russians, that the clearing of the settlement of Svято-Pokrovsk is ongoing. And as you can see, the building that was secured by a Russian soldier took place is located exactly along TO 513 road, which means that Russians managed to cut this road physically. Furthermore, several pro-Russian sources stated that Ukrainians, let's say, under the pressure of the Russian units, were forced to fall back in the western direction. So, according to several pro-Russian sources, by the end of the 3rd of December of 2025, the Russians have established control over this territory already. So, which means that this is a complete disaster for the contingent of the armored forces of Ukraine on the territory of the city of Siversk. Now, Ukrainians from the city of Siversk have just one way to escape, to evacuate, to supply themselves, and we are talking about these fields. But if we take a look at the concentration of these FPV drone attacks, we see that this territory is under complete Russian control without any chances. We're talking about FPV drone control without any chances for the armored forces of Ukraine to carry out successful evacuation, logistic or supply and support. So the city of Siversk is already operationally encircled, and most likely the Russians will continue tightening the noose. And based on this configuration, we also believe that the battle for the city could be finished by the end of 2025, or at least in the early January of 2026. Very important updates are coming from the Liman direction. Today, pro-Ukrainian sources made a significant adjustment of the map. So this is the configuration of the map according to pro-Ukrainian sources. And as you can see, we can see a huge gray zone between the city of Liman and the positions of the armored force of the Russian Federation in the northern part of the settlement of Yampol. The biggest gray zone probably through the entire line of combat contact, which means that the situation is very difficult. And according to this gray zone, the clashes are already taking place on the territory of the village of Ozorne. So, and this is already let's say, the bank of the river of Seversky Donets, and from the settlement of Ozorne, the Russians may try to attack the settlements and the villages of Zakotne, Kriva Luka. So the entire defense line can collapse very, very soon, very fast, without any chances to restore its strength. Furthermore, the Russians continue their pressure on the territory of the settlement of Drobyshevo. Today, pro-Ukrainian sources published a video exactly from this point in the eastern part of the city. We will not watch the video due to violence and casualties, but during this video we might see how Russians were trying to attack the settlement of Drobyshevo from the east, and the very heavy fire of Ukrainian FPV drone operators. Based on this video, we adjusted the map, and now it's become clear that Russians encircled the city of Drobyshevo, and currently the Russians are trying to attack the settlement from at least 3 or even 4 directions. Furthermore, as for the Kupiansk direction, during the previous 24 hours, neutral mappers adjusted their maps to the west of the city of Kupiansk, but telling the truth, we are not hurry up in making changes in this area. We are not going to do this right now because these adjustments were made based on the report of different pro-Ukrainian sources that were published right before meeting between Zelensky and Macron, and we believe that either this counteroffensive doesn't exist at all, or this counteroffensive happened but with just one purpose: to get better and stronger cards for Zelensky before talks with Macron. So we believe that in coming days the territory to the west of the city of Kupiansk would be recolored back in Russian favor. So let's wait and see, but of course if we get additional video that can confirm this, we will make changes, but as of now we will keep as is. Furthermore, I would like to remind you that yesterday the president of the Russian Federation stated that within the next 2-3 days the city of Kupiansk-Kozlovoy would be also captured and cleared by the Russian forces. As for the Kharkiv direction, the Russians continue offensive operation on the territory of the settlement of Vilcha. The sources are saying that by the end of the 3rd of December of 2025, the Russians have already captured up to 20% of the settlement, and that the Russians continue advancing. And that's it for today. Military Summary channel reminds we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.